We had this solution-first thinking while we should have problem-first thinking, which is something that I learned from product management. As a data person, you have to start with a problem. You have to understand your users. You have to understand what challenges they have. Then you have to serve them. You don't have to build the perfect tech stack. You have to solve people's problems.
Welcome to Experimental, the podcast that cuts through the noise to bring you actionable insights in B2C growth, marketing, and data science. I'm your host, Sundar, former head of brand data science at Uber and the mind behind the Experimental newsletter. Join me as I talk with industry leaders who have driven growth at companies like Uber, Spotify, and Netflix. We'll uncover the experiments, failures, and breakthroughs that lead to real results. Now, let's get experimental. Hi, today my guest is Sebastian Hewing. He's a data and AI consultant and has a community where he's helping data leaders become more effective. Before that, he was at Rocket Internet, where he helped launch some of the most successful startups in the world. With that, I want to welcome Sebastian Hewing to Experimental.
Hey, Sundar. Good to be here.
Yes, thank you for joining me. It's a pleasure. I love having you. I love reading your content. And we've talked about so many different things. So one thing I want to first jump into is you've done this many times, but how do you build a data team? What do you look for? Let's start from there.
It depends a little bit on what the company is, right? So I mostly hire for private equity, venture capital backed scale-ups that want to build the first data team. And the type of person that I usually hire is what you would call an analytics engineer, right? So someone who's kind of a little bit in between the tech and the business, who's kind of scrappy enough to pull the tech together, but who can also talk to business stakeholders to understand the challenges, understand the business needs, and really help business stakeholders to get off the ground with data.
Yeah. So when you say you come in for a VC or PE-backed company, like what stage of the company is at? What sort of maturity level? Do they have a data team before? Or is it completely non-existent?
Yeah. So in my case, it's completely non-existent. Yeah. So it's usually so I changed my kind of the point of contact that I used to get into these companies. So it used to be CEOs who mostly hired me in the past. But it shifted a little bit, right? So in the very beginning, when I started consulting, it was mostly CEOs who hired me. Then it became fractional CMOs who realized that they want to help these scale-ups to scale, and they don't have the data to do so, or the data foundations to do so. And then more recently, it became mostly CTOs who had, kind of these, often they had kind of like scheduled queries in BigQuery. It became really a pain for them to manage this. You have a CTO who's busy, shipping product, and then they have engineers having to write ad hoc SQL queries for some ad hoc analysis or fixed dashboards, right? So that kind of shifted a little bit over time.
And why do you think that evolution has happened from CEO to CMO to CTO? Where does that come from?
It's kind of where the biggest pain is, right? So CEOs in scale-ups often don't see data as really a painful issue. So the two other personas, I would say, see it as much bigger pain, right? The fractional CMO who comes in, wants to optimize campaigns and can't do it because the data is not there. And the CTO wants to, ship product and has to spend too much time fixing broken, scheduled spaghetti queries.
And can you give me an estimate for the size of these companies? Is it 50, 100, 200 people?
It really depends. Like for me, the sweet spot is when you have product market fit, which is a bit of a fuzzy term. So typically it's companies between Series A and Series C that do typically between 20 to 100 million in revenue yearly. So it's not really dependent on the number of people, but it's usually like company maturity and also revenue, right? Because and for me, because I cover a lot of marketing use cases, it's also a bit dependent on like the money spent into marketing. So obviously, the higher the marketing budgets, the more it makes sense, right? Because the more you can gain incrementally with a proper data setup.
And what's the pain point that you sell into? Why does the CTO come to you to ask for help? And why can they not just build it themselves?
Well, I find that there's two things. First of all, they don't have the time and the bandwidth, or maybe it's even three things: time and bandwidth, then interest. I know a lot of CTOs who love that data stuff, but I also know a lot of them don't like it at all. And then third is also skill set, right? Because I'm in software engineering, data engineering, even though they share a lot of the same principles, but fundamentally it's very different, right? So it's, I guess, yeah, it's these three things mostly.
Great. So I feel like we've set up a really good framework for this is when Sebastian is called, this is when Sebastian needs to come in. And where do you go from there? What's your process? What do you first look at?
Yeah, so I have kind of a 3-step process, right? So what I've built is kind of like a productized consulting offer. I used to work just like a regular freelancer on an hourly basis, but I realized I'm kind of doing the same thing over and over again. So I turned it into kind of a 3-step fixed framework, fixed price approach. So the first step is usually to go in and kind of do, I would say, a discovery, right? So I go in and talk to all the different stakeholders and understand what they really need, and then basically define a minimum viable data infrastructure that solves a specific use case for typically a specific person or business domain. So I always try to go deep instead of wide. Focus on one or maximum two specific use cases. And so the first step is basically then to define the MVP data foundation. So that's number one. Then number two is to build it. So number one yields a very clear plan of what stage two needs to deliver. And then in stage two, I go and deliver it. And it's a fixed price. Because sometimes it happens that in stage one, we discover that that I can't deliver that use case within that framework, but it only happened once, right? So most of the time, then it goes to step two, and the company can also say after step one, they can say thanks for the strategy, thanks for the roadmap, we'll do it ourselves. But that actually never happened. So then it goes to step two, and I build it, deliver what we defined, and then there's step three. And that's a really important step, is where basically I empower the organization to use that data foundation. And so I typically stay on for typically between 6 and 12 months on kind of a fractional basis. And it's pretty low touch. It's like 1 to 1.5 days per week where I, train like the business stakeholders to self-serve, and where I continue building stuff, where I continue maintaining the thing so that it keeps on working, and yeah, add to the use cases.
And how many clients would you say you've done this for in the past 14 years?
A lot, like more than 40. I mean, including the times where I did it. I mean, it's 3 steps, right? So I did it I always did the same thing, basically. As for Rocket Internet, it was the same thing. We were launching the first data infrastructures for portfolio companies. Then I've done it on a time and material basis, and then I've done it in this productized service. So it's between 40 and 50.
Hey, quick one. If you've ever questioned whether your marketing is actually driving growth, you're not alone. I Rate Experimental, a weekly newsletter for B2C marketers to run smarter experiments and cut wasted spend. There's a free version to get you started and a paid tier if you want deeper case studies and behind-the-scenes breakdowns. Scan the QR code or click the link in the description to join. Now, back to the show. Let's keep digging in because I think this is very valuable for the listeners. But we know it's very hard, right? So step one, you're going in, you've got a bit of a roadmap and discovery. What has been the biggest surprise for you? What keeps popping up?
The issue with this productized approach is you need to know really well what kind of factors influence complexity, right? So what drives complexity in the project? And I learned that pretty well through doing it on a time and material basis. So when I started the productized service, I knew pretty well what are the drivers of complexity and what to look out for to determine pricing and also to maybe reject clients after the discovery phase. At one time, actually, I had a case where where after the discovery, I offered this productized service on that fixed price, and they didn't want to do it on the fixed price. They preferred time and material, which is weird because most of the times it's the other way around. But they didn't. I was very lucky for me because that was one of the cases where I think the only case where I completely underestimated the complexity, because it was a company that had a lot of different. They bought a lot of different business. They bought a lot of different companies. So it was a big mix of different companies that needed to be integrated into one data foundation. And they also had a pretty large number of sources, more than I usually worked with. And that was pretty surprising. It was good for me because on that fixed price model, I would have lost out quite a bit.
And you're talking about data complexity, but there are other types of complexities: stakeholder complexity, resource complexity, tech complexity. Do you have other people helping you out there, or sort of what other complexities have you seen?
Yeah, it's often the human complexity. Yeah. So one of the key components of this blueprint, and one of the key components that makes it work well for me and for my clients, is that I always implement a role that I call the super user, which is a role that I think is lacking in a lot of data team setups or data setups and causes all kinds of problems. And to me, the definition of this role is a business stakeholder that does business decisions, but is technical enough to help themselves in, or to self-serve themselves in about 80% of their data related needs. So it's a person between, like, the typical, like, most users in an organization are the ones who don't self-serve. Yeah, they interact with data pretty passively. Yeah, they might look at dashboards. They might use a couple of preset filters. I think that's the majority of the organization. And then there's analysts who are a bit more technical and who build these data assets. And that super user is kind of someone in between. So it's typically a marketing manager or product manager or finance manager who does business decisions, but can self-serve in a lot of cases. And finding these people is very different every time, right? So there are some companies that have an abundance of these kind of people who would qualify for this kind of role, and there's others where it's a bit more difficult. That's really always kind of the the interesting thing, but it's something that I usually discover pretty early already in the discovery phase.
And why do you feel that building for that super user has really kept you entertained? What's that about?
Yeah, because I always find that that this role kind of really is the missing link between like the tech side and the business side, and because often in a lot of setups, I saw that you have users on the business side who are like, I mean, it's this spectrum on two dimensions, right? You have tech skills and you have business skills. Yeah? And then you have the users on this side who know the business very well. And then you have analysts who are kind of in between, but often I find that they don't understand the business. It's two things: that they don't understand the business well enough, and that's often not even the biggest problem. The biggest problem is they don't have any skin in the game, right? They don't make decisions, and they are not. You know, if money is spent on the wrong marketing campaign, it's not them to blame, right? It's the marketing manager to blame. So in my setups, I want the marketing manager to be able to self-serve because they have skin in the game. They know their business better than in typical setups analysts do.
I think it's a very poetic point. The data consultant, the data advisor is not coming in for the data analyst. They're coming in to help out another function. I think there's something very valuable there, and I'd like to double click into it at some point. But let's circle back to the data engineering point, right? Why is that your first hire?
Yeah, because typically and I mean, it all depends on kind of like how you define the roles, right? Because I think if we talk to 10 people in your audience and ask them what a data scientist is or what a data analyst is, we probably get 10 different answers. But in kind of my book, in the way that I define data scientists and data analysts, is that these people typically, or these roles typically, or people with this skill set typically need some kind of data infrastructure to work with. Yeah? So if you think of a data infrastructure as a layered thing where you put raw data in, then you clean it, and then you start to transform it so that it makes sense for the business, and you start creating KPIs and stuff. Then the data analyst typically start at that step where the data is already structured in a way that it makes sense for the business, and not in the way that messy source systems know the data. Right. So that's why I think it's important to have someone who understands that part, who can take these operational systems and transform the data into a way that it makes sense for the business.
And in your sequencing, like you said, part one, you have a roadmap. Part two is building it out. But where does the hiring come in? How do you think about that?
Yeah, so the way that I work is I do most of the stuff myself, except of the one thing that I outsource is the part where you pull the different data sources into the data warehouse. Yeah, and so then typically from that point onwards, I actually do everything myself, and the reason for that is because I love doing it. Yeah. So I could outsource those parts as well, but that would take the whole fun out of it.
Okay, understood. And this is sort of building out the data teams itself. So this is a different offering, right? You've got Sebastian to come in and help you think through maybe a roadmap, but then there's another offering of building out the data team. Is that how you think about it?
Yeah. So basically, at some point, I want to go out. Yeah. So there is always a point, and there is always also a point where. So typically, I do this with 1 to 1.5 days per week, and at some point, so there is always a point where that starts to not be enough anymore, right? So I always want to find that point, or like a point in time that's before that point, and then start finding that person who can take over full time. And that person then is typically that kind of analytics engineering profile. And then the second hire after that kind of that then depends a little bit on also the exact profile of that person and also the company needs. But that then is often like it's often either a data analyst person or a data scientist, data engineer person.
And this analytics engineer, right, from my experience, this sounds like a bit like a unicorn, someone that's business savvy, someone that's very technical, can also liaise with other parts of the business. Is that your experience, or have you found it to be an easier hire than maybe I'm thinking?
Surprisingly, no. Yeah, I get that a lot. Also I post about that on LinkedIn sometimes, and I always get these comments, "Oh, that person doesn't exist." But surprisingly, it's never been an issue, really. So these people do exist, and I mean, I've built a pretty good network by now to have pretty good access to these people. I know a lot of companies are struggling hiring this kind of profile. But I can't remember a case where I couldn't find someone like this.
Tell me a little bit more about their profile. Are they junior? Are they senior? Are they startups? Are they scale ups? What sort of person has fit this mold in your best experiences?
So I do prefer people with scale up background. So people who are scrappy, people who can basically structure their days by themselves because they need to do a lot of stuff. They need to be able to organize themselves. So yeah, I think one of the key criteria that I look for is previous startup scale up experience. I also look for business acumen and also interest, not only business acumen, but I want to see kind of like a flame. I want to see a passion for the business model that they're going to be working with. I find that is really important. Yeah, they need to have good SQL skills. They need to be really good in SQL. They typically don't need Python, but I do SQL tests in my screenings. Yeah, I think those are the most important things. And I mean, they need to be able to talk and to listen to business stakeholders and also enjoy it. So they need to have a little bit of an outgoing persona. So some of these people are a bit ambivert, a little bit. I mean, most of the times they are more introvert than extrovert, but they need to have a little bit of an ambivert personality, I would say.
Yeah. So for anyone listening, if you're struggling to find this hire, definitely reach out to Sebastian. It sounds really amazing. And I know he's definitely one of those people that commented probably saying it felt like a unicorn. But I want to circle back to something you've said, which is you only spend a day and a half. And with the companies you're working with and the type of work you're doing, that doesn't sound like a lot of time. Is that because you're using a lot of AI to speed up your workflows? Like, where does AI come into this whole picture?
Yeah. So I mean, I've been building this since 10 years. So back then there was there were not these opportunities, or these opportunities that you have today. They didn't exist. So I rely a lot on blueprints and repeatable frameworks and reusable codes. I mean, for a lot of standard sources like Google Analytics, I have code that I can pretty much reuse one-to-one. On the AI side, I'm looking into two things. So I'm looking into one of them more than the other. So I mean, one thing is on the efficiency side. So I'm looking into the vibe coding stuff and seeing if I can use, if I could feed my blueprints into the AI and help to set up these infrastructures even quicker. I typically need like 8 to 12 days. And I don't see no reason why I should be able to do that in like 2 to 3 days, or maybe even less. But I'm not there yet. So it's still kind of 8 to 12 days. And then on the other side, Of course, conversational analytics is a big topic. I think in my setups, it's not like a super urgent need because super users can help themselves with tools they like and they're comfortable with. So I usually use small sheets sitting on top of BigQuery. So I think in my setups, the conversational analytics is not like as crucial as in other setups. But it is something that's coming up, and it is something that I'm researching and that I definitely want to implement into my setups.
I also assume companies are coming to you to say, hey, we want to start to leverage AI. And so do you come in and say, I can help with the AI foundations? Like, do you look at data foundations versus AI foundations the same? Are they different?
Yeah, I think the key difference to me, the key difference is that so my setups, they used to be 100% structured data, right? And what I really want to do is get unstructured data in. You know, so one issue that I always see in all these scale ups is, you know, you have your company goals, and then you run initiatives, and then you have information about these initiatives sitting in a lot of different systems, right? You have like emails, you have Slack chats, you have Confluence, you have Trello, you have whatever. People do interviews. People are kind of working, are setting up hypotheses about how to improve, how to reach a certain goal, and then they go out and do something about it, and then they find something, and then they iterate. And this kind of information is something that I'd really want to get into my data stack. You know? So that you'd have kind of, my vision is you'd have an agent, analytics agent, that is aware of both the company goals, or three things: the company goals, the actuals, and what you're currently doing to move from the actuals to the goal. So it's aware of what is happening and what needs to happen, and can support with that knowledge based on structured data and unstructured data.
Yeah, and something we talked about was supercharging teams with AI. Is this what you mean by that? You know, are there other investments you might make to supercharge teams? Like, how do you go about that?
Yeah, I think there's multiple ways. I think, I mean, you also know it. I mean, you know everything about experimentation. You know how important experimentation is for data teams. I think there's multiple ways, but kind of the two key avenues that I'm looking into right now is, number one, there's this conversational analytics part with analytics agents that are context aware of company goals and initiatives, and then that efficiency part, which would bring down the cost of both the initial setup and then also of running and maintaining it.
One thing I'd like to pivot to is the community you're building, especially around helping future data leaders. But you know, what are the problems that you're seeing continuously? What are the problems that you are addressing this community for? Because this community started even before the arguably pre-AI era. So clearly there were already issues within the community. So what are the things that you're seeing? What are the things that you're trying to fix?
I think there's two aspects to this. Yeah, I think there's the pre-AI problems, and then there's the pre-AI challenges, and then there's the additional challenges that come through everything that's happening around AI. So I think the pre-AI challenges that most people always had is landing in this, or is kind of like this, being treated as a dashboard factory, where a lot of data leaders get into this kind of reactive mode, where they get tickets thrown over the fence by business stakeholders, and they work on these tickets like on a conveyor belt. But then they're very, very far from creating impact. Yeah. And that's very frustrating for a lot of data leads. So I think that's the main pre-AI challenge: not having enough impact, not having a seat on the table, being a dashboard factory, doing low impact, boring work, and always being blamed for everything. Now, the post AI challenges, they add to that. I would say they in a way they make it worse because it adds more noise and more insecurity and I see one big problem is this issue that every day something new happens, right? And it's very hard, also for me, it's super hard to kind of separate signal from noise. Even before AI in the data space, there's 100 new tools being released every day, 100 new tools that you have to have, and that's only getting worse. So basically, on that quest of creating value, or this quest of creating value is kind of getting more difficult because of that. Also because AI kind of raises the expectations of stakeholders in a crazy amount. So yeah, I think it's for a lot of data leaders, it's making the problem worse.
Totally agree. And going back to your time at Rocket, what do you feel enabled you to have a different trajectory? Because what you're saying is very common, that the average data leader is going to end up in this dashboard factory. But what separated you? How were you able to escape that?
Yeah, I was in that dashboard factory domain. So in my first data leadership role at Rocket, I did everything wrong that you can do wrong, and I was firefighting like crazy. So I think for me the big realization came when I actually talked to a lot of people from outside the data space. Within the Rocket Internet domain, or within the Rocket Internet network, one of the key things in this network was that you got access to incredibly talented people. So Rocket had the best CMOs, had the best CPOs, had the best CTOs. So a lot of people outside the data domain, who some of them also became my mentors, and when talking to them, what I realized is that I kind of had it backwards, right? So even coming from a marketing and from a business background, what I did back then at Rocket was I was a technician, and I was building a tech stack. We built a perfect tech solution for people who couldn't drive that, who couldn't handle this solution. So we had this solution first thinking, while we should have had a problem first thinking, which is something that I learned from product management, where you really have to also, as a data person, you have to start with a problem. You have to understand your users, you have to understand what challenges they have, and then you have to serve them. You don't have to build the perfect tech stack. You have to solve people's problems, and people's problems are driven by business problems. So I think that was, long story short, I was rambling on there a little bit, but long story short is that the key shift for me was to move kind of from solution first thinking, from thinking in tech stacks, and to problem first thinking.
I assume this problems first thinking has really helped you as a consultant because you're going in, listening to the problems and solving instead of solutions first. Now, something I'm curious to hear your take about is just the exit opportunities for data leaders, right? If you're a CPO, you become fractional. Very easy. The same thing with marketers, or they become a fractional CMO. But I don't see this with data leaders. And to be fair, at the Series B, C level, you don't need a full-time data leader. You need a fractional one.
Yeah.
But like, what is it that's missing that is preventing the uptake of these fractional data leaders?
Yeah, it's I think it comes back a lot to the decision making power. I think it works if you're really close to business decision making. If you're a fractional CDO who makes business decisions, like for example, when you own experimentation and when you based on experiments decide what you're going to do with your website, for example, then I think it works. But other than that, it's usually, but CEOs usually, if you don't do that, CEOs see you as a cost center, right? And then I think it doesn't make sense from a CEO perspective to have this high cost for chief data officer.
That makes complete sense. And regardless of whether you're fractional or full time, if you don't have the ability to then drive impact, you naturally become a call center and you become a cost center as well. Something I'd like to pivot towards is this new endeavor you got. It's called the 10x Data Collective. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So basically, the 10x Data Collective is a community, or is a paid community that aims at tackling the two problems that I just mentioned, right? So the typical data leaders pre-AI problems and post-AI problems. And so in this community, we're bringing together data leaders and people who want to be data leaders, also so aspirational data leaders who want to build the data teams of the future, AI data teams of the future, who don't want to be dashboard factories anymore, who want to be able to have a peer network of people who help them cut through the noise and really use AI to create more value with data teams and to build more efficient data teams.
And I know you've had this community for a few years. So what insight did you find that, made you think to pivot, to take this new approach to the community building?
Yeah. So previously, the community was branded as a data action mentor community, and it was always around creating business value with your data team. So that thing doesn't change. What changes is the times, right? So AI is important for everyone, and I'm an AI optimist. So I do think we can create 10x data teams, but we need to do it the right way. So basically the general theme of the community stays the same. It's about bringing data leaders together to create more business impact. But this time also more focused on how can we really leverage AI to achieve that. And also the feature set changes a little bit within the community, right? So in the previous community, I had more of like a mentorship model where you have mentors mentoring mentees. Now it's more a peer-to-peer community where peers on the same level help each other to win.
The mentor part is interesting to me because I see it a lot with PMs and marketers. They're able to find mentors, but I don't see it as much with data leadership. I don't see data leaders having mentors. What is it? Is there a stigma? Like, what do you think is blocking data leaders from finding mentors? Because you and I have both talked about how much it has impacted our careers and helped us.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I never really finally answered why it is. Yeah, but I figured that it is an issue. Yeah, and it was one of the key reasons why this model didn't fly. Yeah, because there is a hesitation among data people, but I think it's not only among data people. I think it's also among software engineers. So what I found is that both in software engineering and in data engineering, it's not as common to find mentors than it is in other domains. And it could be because typically software engineers and data engineers are a bit more introverted than marketers and product managers, for example. I think that plays a role. I think it doesn't explain completely. but it is a challenge, and it is also one of the reasons why I'm pivoting away from that model.
One thing I want to revisit is, even as you were talking, the 10x Data Collective is about supercharging data teams with AI the right way. Let's double click on that. What is the right way? What is the wrong way?
Yeah, I think it comes back to what we said just now, right? The wrong way is, let me put AI into everything at the same time, which leads to a million of POCs, and of which nothing goes into production. And the right way is to pick one painful problem, and think about how to solve it. And maybe AI is the right solution for it. It often is, but maybe it's not. Right. So to me, that is the key thing, and it's really weird. I see this over and over, and I also fell into this trap. It's really strange that this same thing happens over and over again, right? It happens. It's the main reason why businesses fail. Main reason why businesses fail is because they build something that no one needs or wants. It's the same problem has been in data before AI. I've done that. I've built data infrastructures that no one wants, tooling that no one wants, and now it's the same with AI again. Just try to chuck it into every process, and then realize, well, it solves a problem that actually doesn't really exist or is not painful enough.
Thank you so much for sharing that. The next part that I want to touch into is the fact that you live in Taiwan. And I think it's incredible that you've been able to build this lifestyle as a freelance advisor and data consultant while still living in Taiwan. And I would love to hear about more how your lifestyle has led you to all these travels and great experiences. And maybe if you can also share maybe a couple stories from your time at Rocket. I assume there's many. You and I have talked about what it was like to be at a company like Rocket or Uber. So yeah, anything that you'd like to share there?
Yeah. Okay. Travel. Now you're touching on a very dangerous topic. I can talk about that for hours. So you need to stop me. Well, I mean, for me, traveling's been. I've always been crazy about traveling, right? So and for me, building my business was never really about building like a unicorn company or becoming a multimillionaire. What I wanted to build is a business around my lifestyle, and what I wanted to achieve was I want to travel at least 6 months every year. And I've done that in the past years. I haven't done it in this year. So this year is a bit different. This year I've only been done 2 months so far, and probably not going to be much more. But that's kind of my ultimate goal that I'm working towards. I always build businesses that fit into this lifestyle. So it needs to be location independent. There can't be any kind of urgent, repetitive tasks. So it needs to be something where I can completely work on my own terms. And that's how I always structured my businesses. And yeah, I mean, this year there's only Japan left for 2 weeks. Japan in September, and other than that, no plans. Sad.
Maybe the top 3 countries you visited.
Top 3. Wow, that's hard. I mean, obviously, I love being in Taiwan. So that's where it's very underrated, I would say. A lot of people don't have this on the map at all. But for me, it's kind of the perfect blend of everything you need in life. Friendly people, good food, decently affordable, great nature, amazing place. So Taiwan is definitely up there. Generally, what I realized is I like islands with mountains. So Taiwan, Japan. I really love Japan. And interestingly, I love the UK. for someone from Europe, and especially someone from Germany. I think the UK will probably not be the place that people would point out as a favorite place. But I would say in Europe, the UK, and maybe then Italy are my favorite places.
And anywhere in particular in the UK?
Oh, many places. Cotswolds, so the area around Bath is super nice. Then Scotland, Isle of Skye, beautiful Scottish Highlands.
Let's end on a fun rocket story, something that is, when you reflect on it, let's end on a fun rocket story, something that you look back on, you're like, that was once in a lifetime, that was so magical.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the rocket stories is always the Oliver Samba stories that are really funny. And I once had a meeting with my boss, who was one of the managing directors of Rocket Internet, and we were sitting and having a meeting, and in that meeting, Oliver Samba called him, and I realized the conversation got more and more heated, and at some point he just took the phone and just threw it on the wall. Just out of the blue. And I was like, oh, all right. What is going on here? But yeah, I mean, these stories, I mean, you'll read of them and see them all over the place. But overall, I have to say it was a super tough workplace. But it was for me, it was the best work experience I ever had, and I would be nowhere close to where I am now if I wouldn't have had that. It's really an incredible school, and I would say it was hard, but always fair. Right? So everyone knew if you join this place, you're gonna work like crazy. And you have to really put in everything you have.
Yeah, I think we've spoken a lot about my experiences at Uber, which is very similar in that it, sets the bar for talent, mission, things that you're looking for, people you want to work with, and so many other things. It's very hard to replicate or find after.
Definitely, yeah. Yeah, you had a great experience as well. I'm a bit jealous of your Uber experience. That I would love to do as well.
Yeah, that was a really good one. And maybe at some point I should do a podcast myself and talk about that.
Maybe I can podcast you one day.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's definitely do it. But Sebastian, as always, it was such a pleasure talking to you. I love all the content you're putting out. I love what you're doing with the community and your new endeavor. It's very exciting for all of us in the data space. And yeah, I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning into Experimental. If today's insights sparked new ideas or made you feel like a smarter marketer, consider leaving a review on your preferred podcast platform. It really helps support the show. For more in-depth discussions and resources, visit experimental.beehive.com. Until next time, be curious and stay experimental.